So there was actually a GPS satellite tracking of the movement of the vehicle throughout the chase. So when we would lose sight, OnStar would call our communications center and say, we have the vehicle now at, and they would give us an updated location. Then we would go to that location. So it was kind of a cat and mouse game, quite honestly, not a typical type of, hey Doug, not a typical, I'll introduce Deputy Doug Allen.
Hey everyone.
Doug is also a longtime veteran of the Sheriff's Office here. He's been here about a year longer than me, and he works your beat here frequently, same nights that I do. He's out here in the valley, and that's where he's assigned to work tonight. So he's going to help out answering any questions and addressing the issues you might have. Thank you for coming, Doug.
Sure.
So it was not like a typical pursuit that you might see on TV where there's all the police cars chasing the car and they kind of stay with the car the whole time. It was more of a cat and mouse game where we'd catch him, he'd run, he'd get away, and then OnStar would call and say, he's over here, and then we'd catch up to him again, and it would go like that. Ultimately, he goes all the way down to Bolinas. It's pretty apparent to me that he's not familiar with Marin County area because when he goes into Bolinas, you know, there's one way in and one way out. And he had pretty much boxed himself in. Unfortunately, we were not close enough to him at that point, and he managed to, again, this cat and mouse game, kind of weasel his way out and come over Bolinas-Fairfax Road. He's seen by a ranger at the water district, going at a high rate of speed, going across Alpine Dam. The ranger actually hears the car, and from his house, he's a resident ranger who lives up there, he hears this, hi, come on in. He hears this speeding car, and he looks down and he sees it tearing across Alpine Dam. So he calls that in, and then Sonoma County deputies and Fairfax police officers catch up with them on Fairfax-Bolinas Road, and the chase starts up again. This goes on for some time. Again, we find him, we lose him, we find him, we lose him, and he ends up out here in Woodacre, and the address where they find him, you probably all know this, but is,
I think it's 46 Bill.
yeah, Hill Road, I think. Yeah, that's where OnStar calls us and says that's where the car is. At which point the deputies get in the area and they ask OnStar, hey, can you activate the horn? It's like a panic alarm if you hit your panic alarm on your fob. OnStar does that. They find the car and it's unoccupied. He's not there. He's fled on foot. There are the community actually.
What time is this?
Thank you.
This is at. One moment here. I want to say it was about 8:06, but I want to give you the right time. That was at 8:08. 8:08 a.m. So the community actually does an excellent job once the notification gets out that this person has been chased into the area. And of course, 8 o'clock in the morning, people are waking up and hearing the commotion, and the calls start coming in. There's a number of different sightings. People see him in their yards. One person sees him on a back deck, and our communication center is kind of flooded with 911 calls. Hey, we think we saw the guy, which is overwhelming for them, but it's also helpful for us because it kind of gives us an idea where we need to surround them. At one point, a sergeant from the Fairfax police is directed to an area where he's been seen, actually sees him, gives foot chase. The suspect drops a backpack, which the sergeant recovers, but he ultimately escapes again.
Where was that happening?
That was, yeah, that was
Redwood.
Woodacre?
Laurel and Redwood.
Laurel and Redwood and Woodacre.
There wasn't any information
Okay,
in
so
that.
then, in terms of the map, this is Drake. What he probably did then is, he took San Geronimo Valley Drive,
Yes.
because the logical thing then is to go right into Hill.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been the thing to do, and so here's Hill. So he left his vehicle somewhere on Hill, from here to the end of Hill.
Yes.
And then what he did was to go over, here's Laurel. Laurel's here. So he worked his way over
46 Hill, so I'm not sure where 46 is.
Does anybody know where 46 Hill is?
That's where he leaves the cars, at
Oh, is that right?
46
46
Hill
Hill.
I
Road.
think it's right off
Write
the
that
red
down.
here.
And that's a detail I didn't
I
have.
saw a picture on TV of
46
Red.
Hill.
Gene, you were riding with him, were you? You seem, you got this down.
Those law enforcement shows, they're awesome.
So,
So anyway, somewhere 46, I'm not sure where 46
And then
Hill
where's
is.
Laurel?
But
Where
that-
was the foot
but that's
chase?
Hill, and it goes all the way down to here, and then it's just a hop and skip for him to get over and to get on,
Yeah,
onto
right.
Laurel.
He came up Oak Grove.
Oak Grove
Oak
first.
Grove first.
Oak
Oh,
Grove,
okay.
right,
Oh.
exactly.
Shower.
And here, oh, here's Laurel.
yeah,
8.
Here's Laurel.
You guys
Castle.
have a name for this guy with that backpack?
Did
Took a
anybody
shower.
here see
Took a shower.
him?
Took a shower at
No.
8.
At my neighbor's.
Yeah.
Mary, tell us about it.
Just saw him. I knew
You
knew it was the guy.
You knew it was a guy,
I
and
knew it was the guy. I couldn't tell you if he had a beard, if he was, if he had glasses. I couldn't tell you anything. I just knew.
and what did you do?
So that was right at the
Called
top.
911.
Call 911.
Jill
Right,
sounds
right,
good.
right.
He
People
was
are really
mine,
good.
Yeah,
it was
no,
mine
the
before
response-
yours, and then went up you.
the response from the community was,
Yeah.
was fabulous.
Yeah, yeah.
He
It-
broke into my neighbor's home
Yeah, he took
first.
a shower.
Took a
and had
shower.
some-
Ate
Where was
juice.
it? Was this
Changed
a-
his
Really?
clothes.
Where-
Top
where-
of Oak.
where-
I'm
was
at the
this
top
at?
of Oak Grove. He was
Oak
right
Grove.
at the top of Oak Grove.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
came
that
out of
was,
that house,
what
and that
time
was
was
at
this?
5 to 12 now. Okay.
Yeah.
Walked on my deck.
Okay, here's Laurel,
Walked on.
and
my
here's
deck.
Oak Grove. So he just crossed down to here. I see what he did. Then say that again, what did he do?
He was
He,
at.
he broke
what's
into
your
the
name?
lower house below me.
Nobody was home?
Is that 79 Oak Grove?
Yeah, 79. That's where he took a shower. and had
Shower,
something to eat.
79 Oak
changed
Grove.
his clothes,
Yeah.
got all the stolen objects, walked up the road, the rest of the road, came onto my front porch, and I'm pretty sure he saw me because he was mumbling, and then just walked halfway through and then walked up the little bit of the road and then continued up on Salix up there, and then obviously went to Mary's afterwards. Yeah,
Nobody
no,
was in
this
the
guy
house?
knows his
Did
way
you know who he
around.
was
When
all
they
at
broke
the
in?
time?
Looked This guy familiar to knows me, his I'd way have to around. say, he wasn't unfamiliar.
Uh-huh.
So when
Yeah.
I gave the police report to the 911 lady, she was very interested in what he was wearing, because that had completely changed from That's right. the
I
lower,
think he changed at the O'Neills. It
Yeah.
seemed
Ah.
and then he
So,
changed.
so what did he have on?
When I saw him, he had a black puffy jacket on and a red hat, a red duffel bag and a blue backpack. I'm pretty sure it was jeans.
Mary's nodding. That's
You-
what
you
you
right?
thought too.
Well,
Well, the red hat, but Joni says a blue shirt, right? By the time he got to her deck?
He was a blue, he had taken off his jacket maybe.
Right.
He had long hair, a ponytail?
No, he didn't. They said that he did. I had heard that, but his hair was up in the baseball cap, so I did not see. I noticed it was red, and he looked a little damp.
Probably just taking a
Why
shower.
would he take a shower? What's the point?
To get rid of all his muddy, wet clothes. His
I'd rather
clothes
get the hell
in
out.
their house was sopping wet.
Yeah,
He
he's
put-
crawling around, you know, between where he left the car and where he ended up. He was going through mud and
Mud,
muck
yeah,
and
he
all
was-
kinds of stuff.
Oh,
Poison oak.
He'll get
Yeah.
Lyme's disease.
Yeah. Hopefully he's got a really good case right now.
So then after that then, where did he go?
Well, the chase initiates, the foot chase starts at
Redwood and Laurel.
at 345 Laurel.
Yeah.
345 Laurel, the Fairfax sergeant sees him, and the foot chase starts there. He westbound. He goes into a creek bed above Redwood Drive. That's where he drops the backpack, which the sergeant recovers. They chases him for quite a while, but again, they lose sight of him. It's a tough place by yourself to chase somebody because there's so many places to hide, and it's heavily wooded.
Well, here's
Of
Redwood
course.
Drive, here's Laurel,
I
and
heard that.
here's Redwood Drive.
So 340. I don't know where. Again, this map doesn't have the numbers, but I'm not sure.
Oh,
where
wait,
it is.
wait, Redwood Drive comes up.
Goes all the way up here.
Oh, yeah.
So he's up here by near the top, and that's where he goes. I
Yeah.
think.
All right,
Him a Buckeye.
so keep,
Yeah, he went.
So he wasn't down on this redwood, he was all the way, he just with Laurel, he went right up to Redwood Drive up
So,
there.
so when the Fairfax officer had him then, why didn't he just shoot him or take him down?
Well,
No, I mean,
think all he
this
did
guy's
was steal a
armed, he's
car.
dangerous.
yeah, I don't think
Did
at
they
that.
know he was armed?
I don't.
Yeah,
Well, see,
they
that's
did.
the problem. The report was the report from Sonoma County was that he was armed, but none of our officers ever saw him with a weapon. So and remember that during that period of time, he had been in and out of a couple of houses, so he could have picked up a weapon. He could have dropped the weapon. Unless we see him with a gun, we're not going to shoot him.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and when I saw him, I had no feeling of,
This guy just took you on a chase, you know.
I had
with
no
slides. He
feeling
flew,
of threat
you know,
or
neither.
maliciousness
No.
at all.
None, I did not either.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
I had no feeling from this person of threat or maliciousness. He was calm, he was just on his path.
Okay.
And I felt compassion for him. This guy is being hunted. It was a very weird situation. I was nervous, calling 911.
Right.
I was nervous, but not from him, just from the
The
situation.
whole totality.
Yes,
of the
yes,
He
yes.
wasn't frightening looking.
Let me just, it's a valid
It's a
question,
general.
so let me just address what the law says that the police officer can shoot a fleeing person under very, very narrow circumstances. And what the law says is they have to be an immediate threat to the community after having committed a particularly heinous crime. Well, running from the police and burglaries are fairly heinous crimes, but that's not what the law and the courts have told us qualifies. It has to be, we have to know he's committed a rape, a murder, something of that nature. It's not simply
property
enough.
Well, I mean, shoot
Yeah.
just maybe at the ground, just to say, hey, you take another step. Let them know you're.
And again, the problem with again, a valid point, but the problem with firing warning shots, etc., is you got to be responsible for where those bullets go, and you just never know.
I'm a
So-
hunter, I know.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
But discharging your weapon in the community raises a level of alarm in the
Oh, no.
community. You just had a large gun go off. Oh my God, somebody's been
Right.
shot.
Right.
And there also it takes then also if you have the suspect, he might then pull out his gun and start shooting.
And
Because
I would sure.
If I have a gun and I'm shooting at somebody, I'm just personal. If I'm shooting at I'm either gonna shoot to wound him or hit him than to threaten him with his life, so he thinks his life's in
And then you
danger.
might shoot back.
And he shoots back, and
And I would say that
Shoot,
if you felt, if you saw the
yeah,
suspect
too far away.
didn't feel particularly threatened by him, probably the officers that were chasing him felt the same way. He was trying to get away. He was trying to escape.
When I was on the phone, when I was on the phone with 911, within minutes, there was a walking policeman coming up my hill, which is a hefty hill, and he had his large gun there.
Yeah.
And the lady said to me, she said, don't go outside. And I go, well, okay, fine, hang up. He needs to know where to go. So I'm knocking on the window showing
Trying
him
to
where he
direct
went outside and told him. Within another 3 minutes, there must have been 5 police cars up at my area,
Right.
which is a dead-end road up on top of Oak Grove. And they all took off in all different directions trying to get to him. And I had phoned some friends up there. I didn't think of you, Mary. Sorry. But one of the other ladies had him on his porch too. So I said, okay, he's in Laurel and Redwood.
Right.
You're gonna find him there.
Right.
Just like, he had been there first, so.
And in fact, that ends up being where the
Yeah,
Fairfax
I mean, I had
officers-
no idea he spent enough time in the home below me, which would have made me even more frightened, I think.
Hugh, one of the interesting things I'd like to follow up on what Mary said just briefly though, is that I talked to a lot of people and that called actually, and I picked up the phone. And it was interesting to me that most people were not fearful, they were concerned about what was going on and wanting the right people to know. But they weren't afraid or anything, which is kind of what you were saying. There was an interesting situation.
Yes,
They
it
weren't
was.
afraid, but they were very concerned. Concerned that, what was going on and what to do, and it's just a kind
Well,
of,
you
I haven't
live
seen that.
you live in statistically one of the safest communities in the United States in terms of your crime rate. Marin County as a whole enjoys one of the lowest crime rates of anywhere in the entire United States. So it's not surprising to me that when some commotion like this happens, people are interested, concerned, not necessarily terrified, because it's not something that they see every day. There's certain things that if you lived in I don't want to pick on any community in particular, but in certain communities where they have high crime rates, there are certain things that raise red flags to people who live there because they know they deal with it so frequently.
One thing that I thought was bad
Okay.
was that the IJ, and I know that it mentioned the sheriff in this, the IJ, and also on TV it said, the people in Woodacre don't lock their doors.
Yeah.
You know, and I
That's too bad.
I
that
thought
they-
Yeah.
invitation like
Yeah.
an invitation for people, oh, let's go to Woodacre, they don't lock
Yeah.
their doors.
I don't think the sheriff's office said that. I think somebody wrote into the IJ and said, should I start locking my doors? And the IJ chose to print that, which says, come on, burglars.
Yeah,
It was also on the Channel 5 News on TV,
Yeah.
so it's like, that was really good.
I was going to share that, and I'm sure Doug's had the same experience in all the years I've worked here. I know that a lot of people in the community don't lock their homes, and sometimes they leave their keys in their car. And I get that. It is one of the safest places in the country. But when a situation like this happens, it makes it easy for somebody to open your door, come in your house,
Take
eat
a
some
shower.
food, take a
Yeah,
shower,
sure.
steal your car, and elude capture. By escaping the community, looking quite differently and driving a different car than he came in. I don't presume to tell anybody how to live. That's a personal choice, and I have a little routine I go through before I go to bed at night. I walk through the house and I lock the doors and I check the windows, and I live in a safe community too. But that I feel better. I know many people I've talked to over the years have told me, I don't want to be a prisoner in my own house. I don't want to live like that. That's why I choose to live where I live. And I all I can say is that's your personal choice, and if you're okay with it, then so am I. I don't criticize that. If you're looking to make sure though that some strange person doesn't walk into your house, would be a good idea to lock it up.
So what was
Go
the
ahead.
last vehicle this fellow was in?
The last vehicle was a blue
Toyota
Highlander.
Highlander.
And did they find that Highlander?
Not as
Not
yet.
as of yet.
How big is a Highlander?
It's a smaller
SUV?
SUV.
A smaller.
Toyota.
Yeah. It's a Toyota.
Yeah, because there was on Laurel yesterday, there was a large, dark colored.
Oh, he's out of here.
This one's a lighter blue.
It's a
Okay,
bright,
okay.
it's a
Really
really
bright
distinctive bright blue
Yeah.
Highlander. We have the plate. Running the plate is just last night. It still showed it outstanding stolen, so it has had no law enforcement contact
Okay.
and has not been found yet.
And was it stolen from Woodacre? Okay, because I heard he spent the night up
thought-
on White
I thought it
Hill.
was San Geronimo.
It was stolen from San Geronimo down on
Right.
behind the golf course there.
I don't think he ever left San Geronimo.
The valley.
You mean
In
Woodacre?
Woodacre.
valley.
I don't think he left Woodacre
It's on the next.
particularly.
Yeah.
I mean, we had so much activity the most of the night,
No.
and
Well,
with the reports that we received the next day, I think it's pretty apparent that he was right in the neighborhood all night long.
I have a question. How come you guys left at 5 o'clock when you had this man out there that was armed from the initial report and all this chaos, and you guys were driving home at 5 when we still had 3
Sunlight.
hours of light? I mean, didn't seem like that
That's a
was.
difficult question. I wasn't there, my sergeant wasn't there, we didn't have any knowledge of what was going on. That was
Right.
actually happening on our days off.
They were all up on Oak
Because if that
Grove
was
until midnight,
Tiburon or
actually.
Ross, you can bet that they would have stayed in there
Yeah.
all night long.
Yeah, who made that
Well, no,
call?
apparently she
That
just
would've
said they
been-
were.
They were all
Records.
up on Oak
No,
Grove
I
until
saw him at
midnight.
5 o'clock.
That
I
would
saw
have been
all
higher
the
than
No, they
Sergeant
were-
Baker
all the
or
trucks
I that
going
would've
out.
came from.
Yeah, because they left
still
our
some.
neighborhood.
well, not many.
Before
They
5.
took the
I am
convoy
not
out of there.
sure.
I saw him.
What,
There were a
they
bunch
had
of
done-
sheriffs up on.
I mean,
our-
obviously that was a
all
long day ordeal. They had a lot of officers. They were
night.
setting up
Change of shift.
what I saw in the paper, tabletop searching, making
Right.
sure they had places covered. At the point in time that they broke down the perimeters and sent the officers home, I don't know what contributed to that decision.
Hugh, do you have that information?
Well,
as to when they left?
I have the sergeant indicates in his report that was working that day that he, because of the elapsed time from the last sighting, which was 4.5 hours, They brought in 2 additional canine units dog units to try to track the suspect's movements, and they were through the entire area, and the dogs did not hit on a scent. And it was based upon that and the elapsed time without a contact with the suspect that they made the decision to terminate the perimeters and the search. I would say I understand the concern about, well, you had a few more hours of daylight, maybe we could have left the perimeter up. Those are valid points, and I won't argue with that. But I think that the facts reflect that the suspect had in fact found a car, stolen it, and left.
Not until
Not
later.
until
Not
late.
until 12
No, I
o'clock.
thought that it was quite late at night that he stole the car.
I don't.
The time frame for when the loss occurred, I believe it was about 10 o'clock at night to
Okay.
discover it at
Okay.
7 o'clock
Right.
the next morning.
Right.
Right.
So any between 10 and 7 o'clock the next morning.
So 5
Was-
PM to 10 PM is a
It's-
long.
Okay,
Right,
then
so
he
he's
was
still in the
area.
neighborhood.
Okay,
He,
okay.
my
yeah.
niece lives on San Geronimo Valley Drive down
Uh-huh.
there, and he tried to break into her house, and he eventually stole the car right across the street,
Okay.
and that
So,
was
Valid points. Again, I wasn't working that day, but I will meet.
But
with,
how come the guy that was working isn't here?
Yeah.
right.
Maybe he can stay off now.
Yeah, he is
This
on his.
meeting was scheduled on their nights off.
Yeah, he was. He
Well,
got
yeah,
done
it was
with
meant to
tonight.
be-
So
That's just our Monday night meeting. It's Monday night. It's
I'll
our
come right
meeting.
back to you, sir. I just want to let you know because I think it's a very valid concern. The watch commander who was here that day is Lieutenant Barry Hain. I think you might have exchanged some emails with him. I'm going to see him in the morning at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I will express that concern to him. And I would imagine he would probably write, and you can disseminate emails to
I've
all
been
these folks
getting, you've been very cooperative.
Okay,
And Sheriff Doyle called me right away.
okay,
And then I had 3 others call and giving me information. And I found holes, and so I could ask, and I knew who to email. And so I'm just writing it all down, and you guys gave us some more information that Paul is getting. I
okay.
kind of want to get the whole thing,
Yeah.
you know.
That's what-
So there's
I
a-
just
yeah, so
need
there's
to
a-
get the whole thing and some of the concerns, and just so people have the whole picture.
Sure, sure.
So there's
And
a-
one
Absolutely.
picture that I was very interested in, and that was the lockdown of the school, because we had left Friday in the morning to go up to return the fry to Warm Springs with the 2 7th grade classes. And all of a sudden, we were just getting ready to go when we heard there's a lockdown happening, and everything was happening very quickly. And we were going, what should we do with 6 cars and stuff full of kids? And they said, just go. And we went up to Nicasio, and we did our thing, and then we just kept in touch with us by cell phone. But I was interested that the school was locked down, and wondered why that was, because of the distance between Woodacre and the school, not knowing where he was, not knowing, you're just wondering these things. But I think what was all interesting is that they chose to lock down Nicasio, and the principal or superintendent locked down this school at Lagunitas in San Geronimo, and it was the police, the deputies or whoever was in charge, suggested that they not lock down because of the distance. And I was giving that a lot of thought, and I'm sure you could need to talk it through. But if you do lock down, then you have certain children who live in Woodacre, friends and parents, grandparents or whatever, they could get really concerned, maybe unnecessarily, unless it's handled right. So you have these things that you have to weigh. You have to weigh what is the best thing to do. Are they in danger? Well, then of course so there's a lot of things, and it's happening fast. It's happening really fast, and you're wanting to be sure people are making the right decision for safety of everybody. But kids are unique in how they relate to things and the emotions that are going on. So a lot was going on.
I couldn't add anything to that. Those are all of the factors that go into that decision-making process, and it's not like when I was Doug and I because I happen to know Doug and I are about
But
the
they
same
did
age.
throw it
When
back
we were
to the
kids,
school.
yeah, you could lock down a school, nobody would ever know
Yeah.
why.
Right.
Now, kids are on their iPhones and they probably have a pretty good idea what's going on, and they're in communication and wondering, and so all of those things go into that evaluation process. Do you lock the school down? And I think from a law enforcement perspective, if we didn't feel there was an immediate threat to the students, we're not going to initiate a school lockdown. But the principal or the administrator running the school
Yeah, right.
may say, you know what, this is too close for my comfort. I have to protect the children. That's my number one priority.
Right.
I'm gonna order a lockdown.
It's a very interesting.
I don't want to forget. I know there were two hands up over here. You sir.
Yeah, William Binzen, Woodacre resident. I have some rather non-flattering perceptions, which
Okay.
I wish to publicly air.
Okay, go ahead.
I first became aware that there was something going on when a fixed-wing aircraft was repeatedly circling around the Woodacre Bowl and over White's Hill, followed by 2 helicopters. I called the fire department, and I learned the gist of it. I wonder how this, quote, massive manhunt, with all of the personnel and resources that were utilized, could possibly have missed catching the man. In Fairfax. To me, it seemed very logical that if he came over the Bolinas to Fairfax Road, as I heard, there are choke points that could have been created with cruisers blocking the road entirely, such that he could not have evaded by the time he got into town. To me, that seems like an error in judgment. That, and in the rules of engagement in conflict and war, you always want to find where you have the most, the greatest degree of control, and you have that at a choke point, not in a town.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a video that was put up on patch.com. I don't know if you know about it. It's sort of, they feature little stories that happen in any town, I guess, in the United States that's been putting into this. And the video shows the guy driving through, I guess, Fairfax. I don't know exactly where it was. And he was being followed by 1 cruiser, 2, 3, 4, 5 cruisers. Were right behind him, and yet he got away. And I think it's sort of inconceivable, because whatever the reasons why maybe he was going too fast, maybe he didn't want to give a high-speed chase because of the risk of damaging other people, collateral damage or whatever you want to call it. But certainly with radios, you would have been able to radio ahead and had somebody else to apprehend him somewhere. To me, it seems almost like the Keystone Cops. There is a perception that many people in the Valley share that law enforcement has been coming down very hard in terms of routine traffic stops. People who come to a stop and the hood goes down and then they go. But apparently if they don't wait for 3 seconds, they still can be ticketed. And to me that feels like overbearing enforcement, coupled with a total lack of efficacy in the ability to accomplish the mission, which to me seemed like pretty simple. 1 guy in a car. And in this patch.com, if you want to go to patch.com, put in our zip code here, and then look under Fairfax, San Anselmo, and then search for Woodacre manhunt, and you'll see this video. The video is very unflattering because it shows what I just described. All these cops, with all their lights going and sirens, but he gets away somehow. And then once it happened, and then in Woodacre, I saw the command center and everything, and a lot of guys just hanging around. And then I've heard stories about a canine unit that was supposedly right behind him, but the guy slipped in the mud, and I'm wondering, where's his reinforcement? Where's the second guy? Where, you know, what? To me, it seemed like it was botched, and botched. And so I, for one, although we live in a very safe place, my question is this. If, with all the resources, because in the parking lot, there were the 5 cruisers, and then also in the parking lot of the Good Earth, there were about 7 more police cruisers just waiting. So, you know, maybe 11 cruisers that I saw right in Fairfax. It's inconceivable that this would be the result. And I think there's some really important analysis that needs to be done about how and why he got away at every stage. Why you guys didn't deliver, not you, but.
So let me take your concerns and kind of split them into 2 categories if I can. One being the as you point out, the efficacy or lack of efficacy in the efforts to apprehend the suspect. And unfortunately, I have very limited ability to comment directly on that because I wasn't there and I wasn't involved. I do have a lot of experience doing this job, and I'd like to think anyway, that I've been fairly successful over the years. So I wonder the same thing you do. I wonder how, with so many resources, including the fact that we have a GPS link to the car as it's moving,
Yeah.
which is like a godsend that you just don't really normally ever get. How does that happen? And I don't know the answer to that myself. So on that point, I would say you ask a very valid question, and you did a very good job of articulating, I think, the facts that get to why this is such an important question. I think that needs to be addressed with Lieutenant Hang because he oversaw ultimately the entire incident and the supervisor that directed that incident specifically.
So he was there, Hang was there?
He came to the command post after that command. You mentioned there was a command post.
Okay.
Once that command post was set up,
He was there.
he was there.
I got it.
So, yeah.
And understanding where the sergeant's going is we want to air those concerns, but it seems like this meeting's on the night that those people weren't available. We want to do this again where those people are, but not to sit and wait. Sergeant Bacon and I have been with the department for close to 25 years. I know he and I have both been in certain situations, such as the pursuits, such as things happening fast. We were talking about earlier. Things happen very fast, real quick. Even though this OnStar, I've never been in a pursuit where there was an OnStar vehicle. It's usually, hey, OnStar calls us, here's your stolen car sitting here and we come get it, type of thing. But as a pursuit going, it sounded like to me, kind of like reviewing things, is like OnStar was quick, but it wasn't like immediate. It wasn't like they could tell you exactly where the car was. It was just at the point in time that the OnStar people were seeing it, then giving it to our dispatchers on the phone, the dispatchers then relaying it to the officers. The officers are very fluid in motion, moving. Everything's happening really fast. By the time they got information where that car was, that 30 seconds ago, now is not there. And they, maybe not understanding that, I don't know, going to the spot where they thought it was, and then the car's going somewhere else. And the update is, no, he's not here anymore, now he's over there. In being in a lot of these situations, whether it be vehicle chases or foot chases, or we have somebody jumping through backyards, I gotta tell you, and this is not an excuse by any means, things happen really fast. There's a lot of confusion on the radio. We try our best to limit that confusion by talking amongst ourselves and communicating with each officer and communicating with the dispatch. And now we got a much better radio system than we had years ago when Sergeant Baker and I first started. We can link in other agencies all onto one channel, which we didn't have that capability before. That still takes time, but getting everybody on the same channel, hearing the same thing at the same time, understanding, it's still confusing and there's still miscommunication. I know for a fact in getting in one recently, they thought I was doing something else when I was very clear on the radio where I was going, but there was confusion that thought that I wasn't actually where I was, but I was misunderstanding something and going in a different direction. for me, I was clear, I knew where I was. Maybe it was my problem telling them clearly where I was, or them just not understanding where I was. So things happen very fast, and we're not trying to make excuses for these officers, and your concerns are valid. And not unlike Sergeant and I, we look at it too from outside the bubble. We weren't there, and we were asking some of the same questions. We don't know either. But for those things that happen, man, they do happen really fast, and sometimes it gets very, very confusing, and we make mistakes.
Right.
You have a follow-up?
Something I didn't say was that the extrapolation from this is that if our law enforcement botches something that really seems pretty simple, what happens if we have a true crisis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the corollary to that is, I personally find it objectionable that Sheriff Doyle, that they want this marauder, this, the armored vehicle.
Oh,
I don't know what it is. It's Bearcat, Marauder, that's, there are a number of them. Because, as you said, and I'm really glad to hear you say that, we live in a relatively safe area. It does seem extreme that we should be having that kind of a machine, and it sends a very uncomforting signal. And the gist of all of this incident and the extrapolation toward, well, what if there really is a serious crisis that requires lots of coordination among different agencies over a wider geographical area, all to be, collaborating. Wow, the potential to have things not go very well is quite significant, and so therefore I think this is a major teaching moment for you guys to figure it out and to say, okay, yeah, we got to coordinate our act here.
I would absolutely not disagree with you that this is a good time to pause. Nobody got hurt. Everybody's okay. We don't have the suspect yet, but he's not out killing people. I mean, it's not that kind of a crime, and it's a good opportunity for us to pause and go back over by the numbers what happened, and kind of Monday morning quarterback, if you will. What could we have done better? How could we have been more effective in managing our resources and so forth? And I don't want to forget. I know that people have questions. I don't want to forget to address the second part of your issue. As far as how, and I have to be careful because the sheriff is my boss, how he spends his budget, that's a decision that he has to make. And I was not consulted in that decision. I'm kind of a rural, small town law enforcement guy. I live in a small town. That's where I choose to raise my family for a reason. That's why I decided to go to work for a sheriff's office and not the Oakland Police, because I didn't want to do that kind of law enforcement. But so I hear what you're saying, but that's me, and I don't control the budget and what we do and don't spend money on. I think those are some valid points that you have that should probably be addressed, with the sheriff or higher up the chain of command than where Doug and I are, because they don't ask us whether we want this vehicle or not. And then as to the second part of your question, with regard to traffic enforcement. Traffic enforcement is not the primary responsibility of the sheriff's office. Doesn't mean we don't do it. Doesn't mean if you call us and say you're concerned because people are speeding up and down your street that we won't show up and do something about it. But it is not our primary objective. The Highway Patrol, the California Highway Patrol, is responsible for traffic enforcement in rural areas, unincorporated areas of the county. When you pay your registration, a little piece of that goes to them, and that pays for them to provide that service. That doesn't mean that we're not pulling people over for failing to stop completely at a stop sign. I run a shift here, and Doug is one of the guys who works for me, and I think Doug knows my philosophy on that. If he sees somebody running a stop sign or doing a California stop or whatever, he's probably going to stop you. He's probably gonna check out what's going on, and if you're just moving on down the road and not doing anything else, he's probably gonna say, okay, you know, well, have a good night and just be mindful that you're supposed to stop. That's how I run my shift. That's how the guys who work for me do their business. But there's 4 shifts, there's 4 different supervisors, and there's 4 different groups of deputies, and some of them may not have the same spirit of law, letter of the law, interpretation that Doug and I do. And so if you ever have an issue with or a concern with that, you know, that the enforcement's too heavy-handed, or there isn't enough of a community concern aspect to it, I would encourage you to call the shift supervisor, because we have the most direct impact. We have a briefing every night where we talk to anywhere from 8 to 12 deputies on our shift, and we tell them what our expectations are and the way we want them to be enforcing the law. So your shift supervisors have the greatest impact on that. And if you have that concern, I would say
Pass this feedback on this.
absolutely,
There
absolutely.
are a couple of hands here, and I'm just concerned that there's some important issues,
Okay,
but it's a digression from the
Yes.
reason we're here.
yes.
We came here to talk about this incident, find
Right.
out what happened, when, where,
Right.
why, whatever. And
Details.
then
The
what
facts.
we had hoped to get,
Okay.
and there's other questions, but hope to get is there 1 or 2 or 3 things that people should do to
Okay.
help? Are there 1, 2, or 3 things people should not do? So, you know, in terms of an incident like this, and then if you want to stay later, there's other,
Yeah.
people have other concerns, but I'd sure like to wrap this one up.
Absolutely.
And I saw some hands that maybe.
So let me say this: if you have a question that is to that point, to getting to the nuts and bolts of what happened, we'll go ahead and take it now. If there's something else, I don't have anywhere I have to be, so I would be happy to stay and talk about anything else that comes up. Okay.
I just wanted to bracket what Bill said, and that is, I think the key to this thing is what the professionals did in terms of a threat assessment, and I heard you speak to that earlier on. And if in your opinion, and it was the opinion of several people in this room who had eye contact with the person, that it wasn't much of a threat, then I would hate the message that you leave here with is that we're looking for a big SWAT team to go after somebody like that. I personally want to compliment you if your folks decided it wasn't a threat, if you had the same pickup and you had a number of contacts with this person, and what you concluded is it wasn't a threat. He probably wasn't armed, or most likely wasn't armed. I would hate to see you take back the message to the sheriff that we want drones in here and we want submachine guns in the corner. I'd like.
I know you don't.
I want to respect the decision-making process that you went through and acknowledge that you guys are the professionals, and not to take away the sense of the room that we want you guys to come in here with firepower the next time
And
something like this happens.
I appreciate that, so thank you.
At least that's my.
And I didn't get that from your question.
all right.
Just so everybody's clear, that's not the interpretation that I have. of
Nor
what you were
what
asking.
I would ever want.
So we're on
No
the
50 caliber.
we're on the same wavelength. Okay. You're just looking for, this was a lot of resources, and why didn't we get a better outcome?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I
Sure.
have 2. One thing, just make a quick pitch on the disaster when things really go wrong. The Disaster Council is having a meeting. We're actually going to talk about preparedness. So anybody who isn't involved,
April 18th,
April 18th.
Thursday, in
'cause-
this room.
Because the realization, and I'll be real quick, is that we are on our own. If there is a big thing that requires lots of communication, these guys are going to be super, super busy. So Disaster Council, it's up to us. The second thing is just to cover, there was a time when at 5 o'clock when the command center was broken down, and 10 o'clock when the car, or 10 to 7 in the morning-ish, when the car was stolen, and we assumed the person left the valley. What was happening? Did everybody leave? Did you leave a couple of guys driving the streets? Or what was actually happening in that window? And then my concern, of course, is that people in San Geronimo, there was no way to make people aware that there's somebody potentially still in the neighborhood.
So excellent question. We didn't just pack up and everybody left. There's always a deputy assigned to this beat. and that person doesn't leave. I mean, it's an ongoing beat that's covered. So what we had was a lot of allied agency assistance. So we actually had a canine unit, a dog with a police officer from San Francisco. We had 2 from Novato. So we don't want to tie those people up if they're not going to benefit us, or we think the usefulness of that resource has been expired or expended. We don't want to tie them up, so we want to let them go. So it's those kind of resources. We had a couple of plainclothes detectives from the Twin Cities Police Department. So we want to let those kind of people go. And when they broke down the command post, that's what they were primarily doing, is releasing those allied agencies. There were still deputies from Point Reyes Station that were in the area. There was still the deputy that's assigned to your local beat here in the valley that was still in the area. But what we did is formally released all those allied agencies, and particularly those people that were on the perimeter.
This lady said there were cars
There were a
there.
bunch of cars still up on Oak Grove until, what, midnight?
Yeah.
Midnight.
Yeah, so we were still around, but we do like to let those resources go if we don't see an immediate need for them. You had a question earlier. I'm sorry. I didn't want to miss you.
Well, I had a couple of things. First, I wanted to ask if this OnStar system, there's no way they can turn that ignition up with that system. Is that correct? I mean, you can track
they
it,
can't.
but
They can
I don't know.
kill it.
I
There's no
believe
kill
that
switch?
OnStar has a kill switch in it.
well,
I believe. But
you know, you would
if it
think
wasn't
that.
used, I don't know why it wasn't used, but I
That's a great
thought
question.
OnStar had a kill switch.
I thought that was one of the selling points of
I
that
thought I
system.
remembered something like that too. You know what? I didn't remember it till you just said it. So when we leave here, I'll be checking that out on the internet. I thought
And
so.
it seems like just west of Deer Park Villa in Fairfax would have been a natural place to have, you know, it's like, and it never would have, you know, he never would have done this. It seems as though since he was seen heading up into the upper reaches of San Geronimo, Woodacre, up through Buckeye Circle, I mean, that's rugged terrain. I'm a long-time resident. I know it's complicated terrain, and this guy seemed to know where he was going. He seemed to know how to get from where that was to Deer Camp Road. Rugged terrain. I hike it. I've been hiking it for years, and I know there's only a few ways to do it, especially if it's dark. And one of them happens to be behind my house, you know, an open space where it connects, where the power line comes down, hits a dirt road, goes over, hits an old horse trail down the ravine to Deer Camp Road. It's many people have hiked it over the years. But it is just, I've hiked up in that area, and I know that if I myself, who've lived here for 35 years, if I cut off cross country, I can get stuck. So this guy, it seems like he's a local resident. He knew where he
Or
was
had
going.
lived here maybe at one time or something.
Had to-
Yeah, it's really hard to know. I mean, we haven't obviously positively identified him yet, so.
Nobody had a phone. All these little encounters. I mean, everybody has phones now.
He had a phone probably, and he knew everything was going on up there on the ridge.
That's entirely possible.
I mean, instead of whipping out a taser, maybe whip out that cell phone. And
Well,
Everybody
yeah,
had
our tasers actually have cameras on them. I don't know about Sonoma counties, if they use that technology or not. I don't know. I mean, these are all the questions that you want to. At one point in our career, Doug and I were detectives, and I actually one of the things I loved about it was sitting down when you catch somebody like this and interviewing them, and if you can get them to talk to you, going back through all those fine points, because a lot of times they'll tell you, this is why I was doing this and why I did that, and it's a very, very interesting. Sometimes they have a very keen plan and knowledge of the area. Sometimes they're winging it, and it's amazing what can happen. There's a pretty significant incentive when you're being chased by that many cops to escape. But why does he go to Bolinas? I don't know. Why does he not keep going south on Shoreline Highway or try to get back over to the hill to 101?
How did he know
Exactly.
Bolinas Road.
If Bolinas Fairfax Road comes back over, I don't
Seems
know.
like a local
I
resident.
mean, you would
Yeah.
think you wouldn't go, you wouldn't
Yeah,
take
you
a
would-
road like that if
I
you were
wouldn't
trying to
take
flee.
Right, because you put one cruiser at the top
Right.
and one at the bottom, you're stuck.
Right,
But then again, would you expect him to use that because it's not a particularly
right.
fast
I don't,
road?
that's what I'm saying. It's very
And if he
interesting.
knows- It seems like he knows all the back roads.
Right.
And I'm
And
just,
we don't know. Doug made a
got
great
GPS.
point. That stuff we think about after the fact, when we catch the person and we're kind of going back through it with them. When we're just trying to get them in custody, things are unfolding by the second, and you really don't have time to think about where this guy might be from or what he might or might not know about the
do you have a
This
part
gal.
description?
No.
I don't
really.
think we do, really. No. I mean, what was provided by the folks who saw him is what we have. And nothing more.
This gal is killed.
Oh, okay, yes, ma'am.
You know, this is a property crime,
Yes.
and no one got hurt in a high-speed chase. I mean,
Right.
to me, that's a botched job. Is if you're chasing some guy for stealing a car, and you hurt somebody who's innocent. And here, that didn't happen.
Right.
So I don't think it was a botched job.
Sure.
Oh, do you know the original? What originally happened, and again, this came from Sonoma County,
Mhm.
up in Petaluma. There was an incident when they first pulled him over, and he had verbally threatened to shoot the officers even though they didn't see a gun.
Right.
He tried to drive away, an officer got tangled up in the car and was dragged
Oh.
and fell. And then the gentleman tried to back up over the officer.
Oh.
They used tasers.
So doesn't he have a description of this guy?
What's a taser?
The tasers of,
Electronic control
Is that-
devices.
and they,
The human electronic.
what's that?
Controls
Cameras over cars?
I'm not sure if Sonoma County has
You
cameras.
gotta watch some more.
But the original want at the time, the original stop was very serious. And yes, I agree with you. We're talking about property crime.
Twice and
And
he's
he's
still able to function?
The backpack that was collected had the taser dart still in it.
Whoa.
So they hit the backpack.
So you guys assumed he was armed and dangerous from the start. I mean, that's what you were looking at.
That's what was,
That
my
was what
understanding
was
was reported to us. Armed and dangerous, although they didn't see a weapon, by his actions, threatening to shoot the officers,
Yeah.
dragging an officer, trying to back up over the officer, and then flee. And that's the reason why it got serious real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
So here's what I don't know. So he's coming over the Bolinas Fairfax Road. Long, twisty, windy road. You cannot take that at 100 miles an hour and get over it. He's got this Insta thing. So it doesn't matter if it's 30-second delay or something. I mean, it's a long
It's gonna
drive.
take several minutes to get over that
So-
road. 15 minutes.
Several minutes.
Like
So while he's doing this little number, where is the blockade in Fairfax? And if they're afraid he's gonna turn around and go back, then they put one at the other end too.
Even in reading the official reports of the incident, I can't tell. I know they pick him up again in Fairfax,
Yeah.
but I can't,
You
the
don't know where
reports
they lost
don't
him.
really even answer that question from when the deputy in Bolinas figures out that, okay, he's on Fairfax-Bolinas Road and starts driving up Fairfax-Bolinas Road, and then the ranger sees him from his residence at Alpine Dam. Even from Alpine Dam to Fairfax is
a
10,
long
15
time.
minute drive,
Oh, at least.
as fast as
At
you can
least.
go. So there's really no explanation of what happens between that period of time. And again, I know we're digress from the purpose of this meeting, but just to kind of try to answer your question, you know, only the man who was in charge of that event can answer why authorization wasn't given for what we call, you know, extreme measures, or a pit maneuver where you may hit the car, ram the car, whatever you want to call it, you know, off the road. I know in my experience that vehicle pursuit is probably one of the most dangerous things you'll ever be involved in. Not only for us, for the suspect, but for a bunch of innocent people that are just trying to mind their own business and get through life. And you have, as a supervisor, you have to make a decision pretty early on. Either you're going to end the thing, or you're going to call everybody off and let the guy go. And I think some of you have alluded to the fact that, hey, that probably wouldn't have been a bad call. given the nature of everything involved. And I think Doug gives us some more information that I didn't have, that this guy was trying to, or hit a police officer with his car. That might up the ante for us a bit. But only the person that was in that position that day knows why or why not he gave the instructions that he did. I don't know.
So another issue, I don't know if it was brought up before I got here, is we got a automated call at early evening that didn't give any information, and we're pressing buttons and trying to get the information, and then an hour plus afterwards something comes in and says the last sighting was on Laurel. We know that that wasn't true. The last sighting was on Redwood at least, if not further. So that didn't give me much confidence, because what I got was not right.
Yeah, I'm not a real big fan of automation myself. In fact, in my own life, if I call some company and I get an automated record, I don't do business with them. I mean, that kind of limits me as to who I can do business with nowadays.
But I think
it
it's
drives
a
me
good
nuts.
service. I thought it was a good service. I got the call
Right.
in the morning that
Yes.
he was in my neighborhood.
Right.
It made me look out my
Right,
window
which
and
led
see
to-
him.
Wow.
Right.
Yes. And then I expected a follow-up call. I got one that was empty,
Right.
and then I got one that was erroneous.
Okay. So, like anything else that's automated, was where I was going. You know, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So somebody put a wrong piece of information into that system,
That's
or an
a big
incorrect
deal.
piece of information into that system, that then conveyed to, I don't know how many hundreds of people probably, that bad information. I couldn't tell you who specifically that person was, but that's a very valid point in a kind of a dissecting of the incident that needs to come out. Is
It's really
here you have a
important
valid
information.
service, but the information that came out was wrong.
Yeah, and
dysfunctional, the first one, the one we got. where
That
it
was
supposed
you. She mentioned that there was some call that you said it was empty.
No one, yeah, it didn't work.
It didn't work.
It didn't give you any information. It gave you two options. You press anything and nothing happened.
You press
Right.
one and it tells you to press one again.
Press-
Yeah, press one again. Yes, I
I thought it
tried.
was just my phone.
Yeah, no, I got the
But I
same thing.
feel that the morning one was extremely beneficial
The
to me.
initial one.
And I
Because you
think,
saw the guy,
plus
yeah.
the fact that all of us were way more aware. If somebody had just walked up, although I knew something was going on, and I probably would have done things, but I was like on it right there to 911. I mean, I was way more aware because of that phone call in
Yeah.
the morning. Say, we do have a lockdown, all that, so,
I shared with you earlier that the community response was really, really good.
yeah,
And that obviously
Police department.
played into that
it's animated.
why that response was so good, because you
Or
had
sheriff
information
department,
to deal with.
whatever.
Was that
It would
just
be
over there?
important to get that.
Because I didn't get it in San
information,
Geronimo.
It was just in our area, I think, that,
Yeah,
where he was.
The system
coming up?
can encompass
Maybe.
pretty much the entire county or a very, very small area.
You got one.
There are a lot of really significant hoops that we have to
Yeah.
jump through to even use that system. It's predominantly designed for natural disasters and fires, flood.
I've been getting, as I said before some people even arrived, that I'm getting all this information, but I hadn't, and I'd heard about the first call. We didn't get that in Lagunitas or Forest Knolls.
We got Woodacre.
The Woodacre people got it, that was correct.
we
I didn't get
But
it
the
on
fact
seven.
that there was other calls that had not correct information
Yeah.
is really serious.
Yeah.
See,
Because
I think
you've
it's
got a
serious.
whole group of people
I think
who
that's serious.
obviously got the first one, they're right on top of it.
Right,
They feel good about that, they know what's happening
right.
to a degree, but then when something else happens that isn't in sync and they know is not right, that's bad news.
Yeah.
That is really bad news. So I'll talk to Heng about that system and some concern about that. That's very,
Well,
very,
I like the system.
Right.
yeah.
I like
right.
the system because
Your issue's
I,
not the
I was
accuracy.
in
There was a
touch with the
breakdown.
officers at the head of our street, and I wanted to know
Yeah, right.
when they left what was going on.
Right.
but then to get erroneous information, and then have the guy still in the neighborhood, and we didn't know that. You know, it just,
No
It's
information
very
is probably better
unsettling.
than the wrong information.
right.
And one thing
But
I
I
want to
wanted
say
information.
on behalf of our communications center, you know, at any given time, we only have one dispatcher dedicated to law enforcement in our communications center. And then we have one that receives calls, and then we have 3 or 4 fire dispatchers, because we dispatch for like 5 or 6 different fire departments. When that, and I talked to her tonight, the one that was actually working when this incident happened, and she said, you know, she says, I always clench my teeth when those automatic calls go out, because the first thing that happens is everybody calls and wants to know what's going on. And she said, we were overwhelmed all day long. We were overwhelmed at people calling in on 911 and wanting to know what was going on. Some people had seen the guy and had important information that needed to get out. So I wanted to say on behalf of them, I think they did a tremendous job of sifting through the people that just wanted information.
She was great.
And
She
the
was
people
great.
that actually had
was great.
seen the guy and knew what was going on. And I've worked with Teresa for many, many years. And so anyway, I just
She was
They were
very
up at our house
professional.
within less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, they were at the top of my hill.
Well, and she was very direct with me. Okay, you get off the phone. You give me your neighbor. She's seen him last.
Yeah.
I mean,
You just happen to have one of the best working that day.
yeah, she was great.
How did they decide who gets the automated call? We got the calls at night, both the one that didn't work and the bogus one. We got nothing. We live right at the top, right against open space, very, you know, we can look at Buckeye, I mean, very vulnerable. We didn't get anything. We got no one going door. We, you know, he knew because something was going on, but.
I see again, I don't know. They, you know, there's a map, they lay it out and they go, okay, this is the area that we want to notify, and then it goes into a computer and it pulls up those phone number prefixes that service that area, and the computer does the rest. So there's so many different possibilities. Maybe they didn't expand it wide enough to cover your area, or maybe your phone number was somehow excluded. That's going to require a little bit more detective work to figure out where that went.
Because
Well,
those
at night,
private
that's-
caller numbers didn't necessarily get it.
I'm sorry,
I have caller ID, and
Yes.
if somebody comes through private caller, they didn't necessarily get these calls.
yeah.
Is it a difference also between landlines and cells?
I think it only works with landlines.
Landline, yeah.
I don't believe that it does cell phones at all, because the cell phone providers are so varied now, and you can't really trace them. Yeah, there's no geographical connection. So it's as far as I know, it's only landlines. Yes, ma'am.
I happened to be volunteering at Nicosia School that day, and they had just, a few days before, done a lockdown drill. But interestingly, they found out about it through an aide getting a Twitter. You know, everybody Twitters now, from Lagunitas School. So nobody even called the school, and they did a very professional lockdown, the principal, and, you know, escorting kids to the bathroom, and not, you know, not, they weren't flat on the floor. They were it was just drawn drapes, you know,
Right.
kids, you know, but they went on about their business. But the final call the principal got was that he was surrounded to release the kids, that, you know, it was a done deal. He was surrounded. And
That's obviously
so
bad
when I left,
information
you
too.
know, he was as good as
We got
caught.
it.
Wow.
Yeah, that was obviously bad information too.
Well, that was on the Valley Yahoo page as well.
Yeah, one of the hardest things to control in an incident like this is the flow of information.
Yep.
And you know, I think I had alluded to it earlier when I was asked about the school lockdown. You know, I have a number of children, and some years ago there was a threat at the school. And anyway, long before anybody called me or said anything to me, you know, I was getting a text message from my daughter, you know, hey, the school's on lockdown, you know, and so I went over there, and you know, here I am with, you know, 100 other parents that wanted to pick their kids up from school, and I walked into the cafeteria, and I remember thinking at the time, I walked into the cafeteria, which is where they were directing the parents to go, and I said, this is terrible, because they've put all these kids and parents in a very, very contained little area, where if the person that made this threat really wanted to do something, we were all a bunch of sitting ducks. And that all happened because of just bad information that was out there from, that the school had gotten, and there was one police officer at the door, So I just say that because it happens everywhere, and it's so hard to control that flow of information. But these are excellent points to help us know that's an area we need to improve on. It is controlling communications and making sure that when we disseminate public information, whether it's through the press, through our TENS unit, our phone system that calls people, or whatever, that we put the correct information out. Yes, ma'am.
That's a good segue into what Jean was requesting earlier. What should we do and what should we not do?
Yeah, thank you for bringing us back. First of all, what the people who saw the person did, that was perfect. Always, if you have to think to yourself, should I call or should I not call? You should call. You should call, and I'd rather get 15, I saw a suspicious person, I don't know if this is who you're looking for, rather than you did see the real guy and we didn't get a call and we could have narrowed down the area where he is. So always, if you're uncertain or you're having an unsure feeling about something, call us, let us know. Second thing is, when an incident happens, and again, I talked earlier about I'm not going to tell anybody how to live. I think you should lock your doors, at least at night, but that's your choice. But if an incident like this happens, we do not want that guy getting into your house, because that changes the dynamics. If you're home, that changes the dynamics of the incident significantly.
Did he break in?
The door to the house that he went in was on the house.
Houses?
Yeah, the first one, the one on Oak
Grove?
Grove.
It was open.
That's unlocked. Yeah, open.
Okay.
The doors are open.
Somebody,
I don't know about
and
the
the one
logging.
on San Geronimo?
I don't know about the San Geronimo house.
somebody gave him a glass of water, some 18-year-old girl I heard. He came up and, I mean, come on.
That's not unheard of either.
Well, he was in the house with her. I mean, that's the, I don't know. That could be-
Certainly, we don't want the guy getting in the house. That changes the dynamics of
Why
the
isn't she
situation.
here? She must have a description of him then.
that was told
Or
to
is-
me by one
oh,
of
that-
the
so that's-
firemen. I don't
that's a
know
rumor.
the whole
That's a
story on
rumor.
that.
Yeah, I don't think we have that piece of information. So that's something, again, that should be followed up on. So yeah, number one, if you see something uncertain or you feel odd about, call. Number two, if an incident's occurring or you know that there's something has happened, lock your doors. At least make it more difficult for the person to get in. Beyond that, just being aware of your surroundings, and I think you pretty much are. I mean, I get a sense that this. I'm sure not everybody knows everybody here, but I get a sense that you have a pretty good idea who's from your community and who's not, and what kind of behavior just doesn't fit in with the people who live here. And I've always felt that way about Marin County. That there really isn't a community that I've worked in here where the people don't pretty much know what is normal for that community and what is not, and then reporting that kind of stuff.
They
Thank
have a
you.
description of her.
Yes.
I do have a comment.
Okay.
Well, the height. and
We read in the papers frequently, several times a week, about innocent people in the Bay Area who are hurt or killed in pursuits. And I really would like to commend the people involved in this, and that they manage the situation regardless of all the mistakes, the things that we can see in hindsight and everything, whatever. They showed a certain restraint, and this was a very dangerous situation, and no one was hurt.
Yeah,
And I will commend them for that.
that's always a good outcome for us.
It's good.
Yes.
At what point are they supposed to put their sirens on? Because when I woke up, I was awake, I was drinking my cup of coffee, and I looked out the window, and there was a highway patrolman and a sheriff going by near the Lagunitas store at about 110 miles an hour without their sirens on, and then a Fairfax cop 10 minutes later with his sirens on, and then they came back, and he came back. I mean, at what point, because my mom, my brother, you know, kids, they're going to school, and these guys, they wouldn't never saw what hit them.
I can tell you what the law says. The law says that any time that we're operating in an emergency capacity where we're gonna be violating the laws, the rules of the road. The rules of the road apply to us too. So if we're exceeding the speed limit, if we're running through stop signs, whatever, the law says we have to have a forward-facing solid red light lit. And we have to use the siren as necessary. It doesn't really say what as necessary. It doesn't define what as necessary is. And it's like so many things, that's a term that is going to mean different things to different people. Like yourself, if I had children walking to school at that time of the morning, I would say as necessary is if you're going fast, it should be on.
Right.
If I'm in a patrol car responding to an emergency and I might not want to alert the suspect that I'm in a particular location, I might not see it as necessary. Always, the onus is on us to be safe. I told my kids as they were driving the car with me the other day, you know, when a police officer is going with their lights and siren on and they're in a crash, very, 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 very rarely is it not our fault. So the burden of responsibility is on us to always be safe. And that's an individual evaluation. You know, the guys that were driving those cars, hopefully we're thinking that at that moment that they were safe. But again, I want you to know what the law says. There's some room for interpretation in there.
I have a question
Yes,
about communications. First of all, the phone system.
Mhm.
I'm really thrilled to hear about it. I had no idea that people in the valley were a part of a system where they could be called. I mean, I have friends who live in town that during flood situations have received calls, but we've never, that I know of, had that happen in the valley. So it would be interesting to know more about how we could register our phone numbers so that we are sure that everybody's on that system.
I think on the Valley Yahoo page there was a link.
We need to know, yeah.
Who was you were
how to get
the
that.
emergency preparedness?
Well,
Well,
no,
you guys
yeah,
are
that was
involved
my
in
next
that.
question. Yeah.
The responsible party in the audience.
Everyone in the valley is on that system.
Okay.
The people that have the system know that.
Okay.
What the mistake is, the people that live in the community don't know what that system is or how it works. And
Okay.
I'll talk with, this is also another really important thing.
Yeah. We need
It's
to
like,
follow up
when
on that,
I
'cause it
heard
sounds
about
like
that,
Mary's
I was
saying
wondering
people-
why we didn't know in Lagunitas what was going on there. And that's when it dawned on me that it could be localized.
It was
They
very
could
nice.
do
So
a certain-
am I
Yes.
understanding
Yeah.
you
You
correctly?
can
There are
dial it
people
down.
in Woodacre
People
that
don't
did
know
not
that.
get the call.
There were people in Woodacre who didn't, in our neighborhood who did not get
There
the
are
call.
people who
Yeah.
in their
Yeah,
neighborhood that
right.
did not.
Well,
I think
clearly,
they may have been private caller.
So it'd be
does that
good
make
to know
sense
more
to you?
about that system.
Yeah, and the
work out
reason I
those
was
kinks.
asking about the emergency preparedness is that system is managed by the Office of Emergency Services, and there is a director, and so in working with that general emergency preparedness, I would ask.
well,
OES.
clearly, their maps do not encompass some of the area. That's what the
Right.
problem is.
The rest of my
That can be
question
cleaned
on
up.
communications is, how many different departments do you feel were involved in the chase? And, I mean, you don't have to answer this question, but just if there's a way for you guys to go back and think about how did Sonoma and unincorporated Sheriff's Department and Fairfax, I mean, we're getting kind of back to your point, that it would be nice that you guys felt strong enough that the whole communication systems worked well enough and there just really wasn't a way to get in front of this guy and stop him based on the OnStar thing wasn't always engaged, which that was really good to know. That I kind of thought my vision of OnStar was that you guys had him the whole time,
No,
that whole route.
It's intermittent.
So to know that it's really intermittent like that explains a lot.
It does,
And
yeah.
it sounds to me like you guys did not know that he'd done that road from Bolinas to Fairfax until he hit Alpine Dam.
We
So it'd
couldn't
be good
certain,
to
though.
kind of, timeline that and see and just have an opportunity to look at it as a learning exercise, which you guys do anyway, but.
I will answer your question about the agencies involved, and you know, communications tends to be county by county. So in other words, we can communicate really well with the Fairfax Police, actually. We have the very same radios. All of Marin County emergency responders are on, we call MIRA, the Marin Emergency Radio Authority. And all the same radios, all the same system, all the same repeaters. So we communicate really well. When you go outside Marin County, that breaks down. There really is no, I mean, there are some archaic, like back from the 1960s, statewide law enforcement communication systems that are marginally operational. But so when we brought in Sonoma County, our communication with them was, you know, they would call their dispatch in Santa Rosa, who would call our dispatch in Santa Rafael, who would relay that information to us in the field, and vice versa.
Could you throw into the mix of that the communication with Highway Patrol?
And the communication with Highway Patrol is a real challenge all the time because some years ago, when Doug and I started working here, we used to have a red phone in our communications center. And it was really cool. It was like, you know, the red phone in the White House. That you pick it up and it rings and somebody answers it. But it used to get answered in San Francisco CHP dispatch. In San Francisco dispatch CHP, in San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo counties. And their dispatchers knew every nook and cranny of the county, and they knew every road, and they knew they communicated really well. And then the state decided about 91, 92, somewhere in there, that it was more financially efficient if they regionalized. So now their dispatch center is in Benicia. And literally what you have, if you walk in there, is you have a bunch of people that sit in cubicles in front of computers, and they dispatch for like 5 counties, something like that.
But I feel like you guys deserve better backup than that. I mean,
We have given the Highway Patrol some of our radios, and so it's gotten a little bit better in that some of the Highway Patrol units, when they're driving around out there, they are actually monitoring our radio frequency, and we can talk back and forth.
Actually, the Highway Patrolman was the first guy I saw come by
with no siren.
with no siren.
It just seems
But
to
see,
me
you're getting
that,
into
that,
some
you know,
really
you guys are there to
Well, and
fight
so how
crime,
much-
and these guys are there.
And then
because
we're
of the
spending how
traffic
many
incident.
millions of dollars? What's the
Well-
radio communication thing? It's like $50 million or something like that.
Mira, you mean?
The one they're proposing to spend the new, it's something proposed coming up. Mira, maybe Mira.
I don't know.
It's a countywide radio thing. It'll probably still be great for the countywide stuff
Yeah.
and won't solve any of these other problems.
You're transitioning into some.